Very good. Well, thanks for coming, everybody. I'm State Senator Don DeWitte from the 33rd Senate District, representing Kane, McHenry, and DuPage counties. I'm joined here today by my Senate colleagues, Senator Sally Turner, Senator Seth Lewis, and Leader Chapin Rose to discuss the only constitutional responsibility that this General Assembly has here in Springfield, that it is absolutely required to fulfill every year, and that's to pass a budget. The four of us serve as Senate Republican budgeteers. In addition to our work on the Senate Appropriations Committee, we are part of the core group that engages in budget discussions with the majority party's budgeteers as the final spending plan comes together during these last critical days of this session. I would have to describe this year's conversations as amicable and courteous, and we do appreciate having a seat at the table to share our priorities and concerns with our counterparts in the Senate. But experience has taught us that as the clock winds down, just like the game of musical chairs, our seats mysteriously disappear. Today is May 27th. We have just 4 days left to move a multi-billion-dollar budget and its accompanying implementation legislation through both chambers and onto the governor's desk. And while this session year has been interesting and different in many ways, I would say the budget process is rolling out similarly to previous years. Every year, agencies and department heads appear before the Appropriations Committee to present their funding requests for the coming fiscal year. Those requests are introduced through legislation and assigned bill numbers as part of the formal legislative process. This year, in response to feedback that the process is either difficult to follow or simply non-transparent, all of those agency requests were rolled into a single bill that was filed several weeks ago, Senate Bill 2512. I'm sure many may have found that helpful. However, despite what you may have read, this document is not the budget. It is not the document we are reviewing and vetting. It is not the document that we will all vote on. In the coming days, we expect to see one amendment or perhaps several amendments that will become the final fiscal 2027 budget. And if history is any guide, Republicans will not see the thousands of pages of final budget language until late on the final day or during the overnight hours of May 31st. This is my 8th and probably final budget year. And while the names, numbers, and headlines may change from year to year, our mission as Senate Republicans remains exactly the same: to advocate for the residents of this state we represent and to fight for a budget that respects taxpayers and reflects Illinois' families' priorities. I'm happy to now turn the podium over to my colleague, Senator Seth Lewis.
Thank you, Senator. Good morning. I'm State Senator Seth Lewis. I represent the 24th District in the Western DuPage and suburban Cook counties. Thank you all for being here today. Since February, the Senate Appropriations Committee has heard testimony from agency and department leaders from across state government. These hearings are an important part of the process because they give lawmakers like us the opportunity to ask questions, review priorities, and better understand how taxpayer dollars are being spent. As Senate Republican budgeteers, our focus throughout this process has been straightforward: fiscal responsibility, accountability to taxpayers, and identifying ways to make government more efficient while delivering the services to those who need it most. We have not agreed with every proposal brought before us, but we have appreciated being a part of the conversation and engaging in the process in a constructive way. As Senator DeWitte mentioned, all of those agency and departmental requests have been compiled into a 3,178-page document known as Senate Bill 2512. And that's an important number, 3,178 pages. The legislation currently outlines approximately $53.7 billion in spending. Senate Bill 2512 was filed on May 7th, 2026. That's an attempt to provide transparency in the 3 weeks of time in order for all of us to review. That's a good start in making government more transparent. But here's the issue. Earlier this year, during his budget address, Governor J.B. Pritzker proposed a budget totaling roughly $56 billion for the coming fiscal year. Another record high spending plan for the state of Illinois. That leaves a gap of over $2 billion between what has publicly been filed in SB 2512 and the governor's proposed level of spending. And that is where we have serious concerns about transparency. Because we know what happens next. Between now and the overnight hours of May 31st, we'll see an amended budget that has hundreds of additional pages that detail where that $2 billion in spending and tax and fee increases are going to go. This will represent the full budget that lawmakers and the public may only have hours to review, if not even minutes. That is not transparency, and we should be able to see those pages now. Let us see the full budget bill now. A budget should not be built behind closed doors and rushed before sunrise. The people we represent deserve a budgeting process that is open, understandable, and deliberate. Families and small businesses across Illinois do not make billion-dollar financial decisions in the middle of the night. State government should not operate that way as well. Transparency is not a partisan issue. Taxpayers deserve to know how their money is being spent before the vote is called, not after. When major spending items are added at the last minute without adequate time for lawmakers or the public to review and examine them, it undermines the confidence in the process and creates understandable skepticism about how taxpayer dollars are being spent. Transparency should not be an afterthought. Illinois families have to live within a budget every single day. State government should be held to the same standard. And don't get us wrong, this is not about opposing every spending proposal that may ultimately be included in the final budget. It is ensuring transparency, accountability, and thoughtful review before decisions involving billions of dollars are made. Illinois taxpayers deserve nothing less. Good government does not fear scrutiny. In fact, good government embraces scrutiny because scrutiny and transparency is what builds public trust. Thank you, and I now hand it over to Senator Sally Turner.
Good morning. Hi, I'm State Senator Sally Turner, and I represent the 44th Senate District. Right before this press conference, you heard from some folks with the Illinois Revenue Alliance, as well as some legislators who are promoting new taxes. These new taxes were to fund even more government spending. And once again, it's Illinois families, our farmers, our small businesses, our job creators who would end up paying the price. That should concern every single taxpayer in this state. Let's talk about what they're actually pushing. One of those ideas is brand new digital advertising tax. That cost is not going to stay just with large tech companies. It's going to get passed down to small businesses that rely on affordable online advertising to reach customers to grow their business base. It's about the local bakeries trying to attract a customer online, a person running a small business out of their home. Those businesses are already dealing with major inflation, rising utility bills, higher insurance costs, and increased expenses across the board. We're also seeing these new proposals to eliminate the sales tax on biodiesel and renewable diesel. At a time when our farmers are already facing costs and uncertainty, this sends exactly the wrong message to rural Illinois. These incentives that support our soybean farmers, their diesel production, their biodiesel production, their transportation jobs, their local economies throughout our state. 20% of our truckers drive with biodiesel fuel. And do you think that that's going to make our taxes lower? No, it's going to increase our taxes, and our goods and services are going to go up if they eliminate that tax incentive. Let's not forget what this does to our families. It means paying more at the pump for those workers that rely on travel every day. And at the same time, there are efforts to roll back incentives tied to the Blue Collar Jobs Act, which that has helped support investment in manufacturing growth and good paying jobs in our state. Instead of making Illinois more competitive, these ideas move us in the opposite direction. Our Illinois families are already stretched thin, and they do not want higher taxes. They do not want higher fuel costs. They do not want policies that make it harder to run a business, create jobs, or support our agriculture. What they want is affordability and responsible budgeting. And unfortunately, that is not what we're seeing right now. We're seeing continued spending growth, followed by discussions about how people should pay even more for it. That's the wrong direction for Illinois. And our hard-working taxpayers, our citizens of this state, deserve better. Thank you, and I'd like to now turn it over to Senator Rose.
Thank you, Leader Turner. Chapin Rose, 51st District. So we want to talk a little bit more on this transparency issue, and then I want to turn to the press conference that was right before us. You know, the governor's introduced budget was already $700 million in the hole. He had $712 million in proposed tax increases to pay for that. But then after the most recent revenue estimates came out a couple weeks ago, he's now $900 million in the hole, okay? So a couple weeks ago, the governor's proposed budget goes $900 million in the hole. Then as Senator Lewis just pointed out, then you have this mystery bill that comes out of nowhere that's $2 billion less than the governor's, right? So what's missing from that? Where'd all that spending go? It went off book. It's things like transfers and fund transfers and all those budgetary gimmicks and things that you've seen Springfield do for years to sticky tack and duct tape a budget together. So at the end of the day, you have less transparency in the name of transparency, which is only in some Orwellian world can you come up with that. But the reality is you're missing $2 billion 2 weeks out. You already have a $900 million hole in the governor's budget, and we all know what's going to happen. Sometime between now and Sunday night at midnight, the real budget's going to show up, and no one in this room, no one watching this at home is going to know what happened until Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday next week after it passed. So this is the definition of insanity, folks. I mean, boom, just like that. You're going to have 3,000 pages, drop it out of nowhere, as Senator Lewis pointed out. Then you'll have a revenue bill, then you'll have a BEMP bill, and suddenly you'll be able to find out what did happen to that $2 billion. And by the way, everybody, does anyone really think it's just going to be $2 billion that magically reappears?
It's a magic.
It's going to be way more than $2 billion that reappears, all right? But then I think the real question here, that's the Democrats' games and budget chicanery that we've dealt with for years. The real question here is, how much is enough? Since J.B. Pritzker took over as governor 8 years ago, spending in this state is up $16 billion. $16 billion. Where does it stop? When does it end? How much more can the people of Illinois take? He's tripled people's power bills. He's 3 different times he's voted to raise your power bills in this state. And yet spending's up $16 billion, and the people who are in here just before us want billions more in taxes on the working people of Illinois. Where does it end? How much more do you need? When does it stop? Oh, by the way, it's not going to stop May 31st at midnight. I can tell you that much. All that stuff that was just talked about a second ago, all those billions in tax increases, they're all coming back in veto session, in lame duck session. They know they can't pass them now with November between here and there, but once November's over with, they'll decouple the heck out of Illinois. By the way, when you hear, progressive leftist buzzwords like decouple, okay, that's just a fancy word for tax increase. It comes back to this. How much more can the families of Illinois who are already struggling take the spending, this unconstrained, out of control spending by J.B. Pritzker and the Democrats, that $16 billion still isn't enough? No, let's go tax people more. Let's go tax them more. So transparency, we'll all find out sometime next week what really happened. Don't for a minute fall for this nonsense of the transparency bill from 3 weeks ago, missing $2 billion. But really the question is like, how much is enough? When does it end? When do you stop punishing the working people of this state? Anybody have anything else to add? Okay. Any questions?
Senator, when you talk about $2 billion missing, you've also talked about how you guys have gotten a seat at the table with Senate Democrats for all this. Have you confronted them about this? And if so, what do they tell you?
What we're referring to is where we've been invited. And yes, we've had a seat at that table. We've had meetings and appropriations that have been scheduled. We have had meetings with the governor's team to go through all of the agencies. We've asked, we want to be a part of what's going on now. Those meetings are being scheduled this week. They weren't scheduled last week. So that's why we're asking, hey, bring us in the room. Let's figure out where that $2 billion went.
Yeah, we're trying
But-
to find holes.
As Senator DeWitte said, it's musical chairs. Our seats at the table, our chairs have been taken away.
What does the budget have to look like to garner even one Republican vote?
Let's start with transparency. Let's start with something that's real. Let's start with something that doesn't show up at, by the way, if you remember like 2 years ago or even last year, like we were debating the budget in committee before it was even filed. How do you know what you're debating when the document itself isn't filed? So Dave, let's start with transparency, okay? I think you also have stability over the long term where you're not coming back to the taxpayers every single year for tax increases. I mean, this is $900 million this year. It was $1 billion last year. It was $1 billion the year before that. Every year they come up short because they can't stop spending. So, there's a lot. I put it differently. If we were running this show, it'd be a heck of a lot different.
I don't think that really answers the question, though.
I just gave you 3 examples.
With respect, what does it have to look like? Well, you talk about long-term stability. I'm not sure that's something per se that's in the budget.
Transparent.
What about a budget that shows a vision of growth and prosperity? Our corporate tax revenue is going down. That's a clear indication that businesses are leaving. And as we talk more about progressive revenue and socialistic revenue models, that is not going to invite businesses to do business here in Illinois. And we're not seeing, the governor is not leading on this. He is running to be governor for the next 4 years. The current budget that he is proposing is a budget that visions flat, no growth. There is no excitement where the rest of the world says, I want to move to Illinois because they have what's going on. We need some of those ideas in this budget before we start saying yes. We need an idea that says, wow, Illinois is a place where people want to live. We value them, not leave. We're forecasted to decline by 500,000 people, our state, over the next 5 years. Our governor has the ability to change that trajectory now. He's running for governor the next 4 years. If he wins, he owns our future. That's a budget we want to see that shows prosperity. That's what's going to take.
Governor, yes.
Mr. Dahl, I want to answer your question because I know the answer you're looking for is very specific. I could support a budget that didn't cut funding from our local governments through the LGDF fund, that reduces municipalities' portion of sales tax and income tax revenues that come into this state. That number is being cut again this year. What's the end result of municipalities across this state losing that revenue? They have to make it up somewhere. They make it up in property taxes. Let's talk about K through 12 education. That's a crisis area for us that we think is vitally important to this state. We have never, in the 8 years I've been here, we have never met the constitutional obligation that the state government will be the majority funder of education in this state. Right now, we're in the 30 to 35 percentile. He's cut $47 million out of the K through 12 education budget this year. How do school districts, portions of our state government that are important to Republicans, how do they make that up? Property tax increases. If we would start funding the important agencies that need our funding, that our residents feel are more important than where some of this money is going right now, I'm all for it. They keep ranting about the fact that the federal government is going to rob them of all of these benefits, of SNAP benefits and transportation benefits. And not one state agency could tell me how much money have they lost in this national budget. Number one, it doesn't even go into effect until 2027. People are losing SNAP benefits in this state because residents who have had to recertify, miraculously, they have figured out they no longer qualify for benefits. We've got one of the highest error rates for bad judgment making SNAP benefit payments in the entire nation. We are more than double the national average. Being that far out of kilter with the federal government is going to cost this state $700 million. And Gombe has substantiated that number. When this state government starts choosing to fund those issues important to residents across this state, I'll vote for a budget.
Let me say one thing on that. Dave, I want to expand on Senator DeWitte's point about local property taxes as school funding, okay? Because give you some specifics. Under Governor Pritzker's introduced budget, once again, he's cut mandated categoricals. For what does that mean? For the suburban parts of the state, that's really their main level of taxpayer support for a school district. It's things for special education. It's things for special education transportation. It's things like transportation is rolling buses every day to get kids to school. When you cut in the categoricals, you're going right into every school district's budget, okay? I'm a downstater, okay? I got lots of miles that we got to roll buses on every day. So when you this is the Orwellian terminology of the left. They're not cuts, they're prorations, okay? Well, when you prorate, that's a cut to that local school district, and it raises your property taxes. You know what else they've cut? They cut the property tax relief fund, okay? So what would we like to see? We'd like to see some property tax relief for the people of Illinois, all right? We would like to see, as Senator Lewis just pointed out, our growth rate as a state is woefully behind not just the nation, but our entire Midwest. So you cannot tax your way to prosperity. There is no society in the history of Earth that has taxed its way to prosperity. Find one. You can't. You can grow your way out of a problem, but that starts with fiscal discipline and smart maneuvering and not harming the very people you claim to represent.
All right, thank you guys. Our window's up here.
All right, thanks.
We still love you, Dave.
Well, I love you.